Welcome back. In this portion, we are going to learn all kinds of things about that amazing alveolus. So where we left off was we had a respiratory bronchiole, which was leading us to an alveolus. Oh, that wasn't quite accurate. The respiratory bronchiole itself breaks up into about a half a dozen little tiny super short alveolar ducts that have a very thin wall, and along their edges they have the alveoli, forming what is known as an alveolar sac, that so-called bunch of grapes. However, unlike grapes, each of which is distinct and has a wall all the way around, this is a little bit different in that they're all functioning kind of like one big house, and so the walls and parts of the walls of the individual rooms or grapes are removed. And so you have this atrium area, center space in the middle, from which the alveolar sac have openings into each individual alveolus. So what has happened is we have gone from about 500,000 respiratory bronchioles to about 8 million alveolar sacs, which gives us about 300 million alveoli, because there's dozens of alveoli on every alveolar sac. So if we were to peel the equivalent of the outside wall, in other words, the epithelium of these alveoli off, which is the same as peeling all the skins off the grapes and then laying them out, you would end up with the surface area of an 8 by 10 room. And the whole point of this visual is for you to realize there's a huge surface area for gas exchange. In fact, if we take this picture of normal, beautiful lung tissue here on the left, and we look up close at these walls of the alveoli, what you will notice at all the little nooks and cranny edges, there are capillaries. So looking at the model from the outside, all of these red structures are representing that the capillary bed is surrounding each of these alveoli. It's a little bit different from models, because on models of the alveoli and alveolar sacs, they show like the blood vessels on half of it only. And so you think, okay, so part of it has blood vessels and part of it doesn't, but I want you to realize every alveolus is surrounded by capillary beds. And then this is the last remnants of the smooth muscle, which once again can, in asthmatics especially, cause constriction and blockage of the airway. So we're going to do a lot of gas exchange in this alveolus. So let's look at the cells and let's look at it a little bit closely. So who's who? First off, we're going to use the word alveolar cells, but some other folks use the word pneumocytes. So if you read about pneumocytes, don't freak out. They're just talking about your alveolar cells. So looking at this picture, you can see that we've got a whole bunch of these rose-colored cells, and then you can see the little openings, little alveolar ducts, okay? And then we have these triangular areas that have these orange biconcave cells. Just pretend they're red and not orange. Then we have these green cells, and then we have these blue cells. So when you're eyeballing it from a distance, you can tell that the cell you have most of are those rose-colored cells. And those rose-colored cells are your type 1 alveolar cells. And obviously, when you're looking at them, you're going, hopefully, obviously, you were thinking, kind of reminds me of fried eggs. A bunch of fried eggs, looking at them from above, which should have triggered some memory. Oh, fried eggs. Squamous epithelium, simple squamous epithelium. Because yes, your type 1 alveolar cells will be forming a simple squamous epithelium, but they're not, the name of the cell is not simple squamous epithelium. The name of the cell is a type 1 alveolar cell. And the whole function of this is going to be rapid gas diffusion, as we will see shortly. So now let's move over to the Oscar the Grouch green cells, and these are your type 2 alveolar cells. and they secrete a substance known as surfactant that is super important in the breathing process because its function is to decrease the surface tension. And you're going, awesome, I'll memorize that, but I have no clue what that means. In which case you should never say awesome, just one more thing to memorize. You should ask, what the F does that mean? Okay, so understand the function of surfactant. I want you to think about the last time that you had to blow up, say, 30 balloons for a birthday party. Okay, yeah, and there was no party store nearby, and you didn't have a tank of gas. You had to blow them up. So what was the hardest part about the blowing up? And here's where students always tell me, tying the knot. And I'm going, since when is tying blowing? Okay. The hardest part of blowing it, even though you can clearly see there is some air inside the balloon when you start because it hasn't completely collapsed. The hardest part is the initial oomph to get it started. And once it's started, it doesn't take nearly the amount of energy to completely blowing it up. And so that's the function of surface tension. It keeps the alveoli from collapsing down like your unblown balloon so that it doesn't take a tremendous pressure with every inhalation to have it fill up with gas. So your alveoli are never emptying like your empty balloons are. The surface tension keeps them partway inflated at all times. Moving on to the blue cells, these are just your standard macrophages because they're an alveoli. We call them alveolar macrophages. And yes, they're like Roomba vacuum cleaners cruising around looking to see if there's anything that came down in this part where it was supposed to be sterile. Now, sometimes it's not bacteria come down, sometimes it's particulate matter. Ooh. For instance, like that ash. Don't know why. That all just zoomed really quickly. Okay, apologies for that. Okay, so let's look at this gas exchange now. So what we have is we have this pink type 1 alveolar cell with its basement membrane. I think it's supposed to have a basement membrane. And then we have the capillary with its simple squamous epithelium that's supposed to have a basement membrane. And what you would find out is they actually share the same basement membrane. And so this makes it super thin, even thinner for gas exchange. So this is ideal. So what we have is we have a capillary bed with partially deoxygenated blood coming in on one side. And so most people think it takes the entire pathway around for it to be oxygenated and just made it before exit. When in fact, all the gas exchange usually happens in the first third, which is good because there is a spare in case there's something bad going on inside the airway. It can take longer. This does show that little bit of coating of surfactant on the airway. So the thing is, the gases are lipid soluble, so they diffuse back and forth, whether it's oxygen or carbon dioxide. So no problem there. So on this side, we have our normal respiratory membranes. We have our bronchial epithelium coming down into our respiratory bronchial, and when the respiratory bronchial, we shift to our simple squamous epithelium and alveolus. We have our type 1 cells. We have our lovely type 2 cells secreting a thin layer of surfactant over them, and then we have our alveolar macrophages. Now, for instance, let's say you caught coronavirus. Well, at this point in time, you're going to have an inflammatory reaction. So you have all kinds of cytokines being released. You have cells that are dying. You have necrotic type 1 cells. You have necrotic type 2 cells. You have a bunch of extra fluid with all its debris. You form something called a hyaline membrane. And so you've got this membrane covering where gas exchange is supposed to happen. So your blood gas oxygenation is plummeting. Yeah, not a good thing. So let's stick with the picture on the left and let's keep our habits healthy. So not only do we get coronavirus, whether it's the type that gives us COVID-19 or the type that can give us the common cold, or we catch other viruses, you know, the typical ones that give us influenza every year, or even bacterial infections for a bacterial pneumonia. Let's keep our lungs healthy and aerated. And with that, I am done with the alveolus, and I'll see you again shortly. Thank you. And hopefully you're finding this organ system kind of interesting and kind of important for life.